Buenas tardes, good afternoon. I want to welcome, we are going to record this session, and it's going to be put in the ILA's website, and for that reason, I'm going to speak in English, but you're very welcome to ask the questions in Spanish. So welcome to this roundtable on higher education and research in Mexico. I am Regina Cortina. I am a professor of education at Teachers College, Columbia University. Today's webinar will feature two panelists, and we're going to hold a second roundtable on Thursday, April 1st. And I welcome all of you to join us. The Cuarta Transformacion, or the fourth transformation, is the name Mexican President Lopez Obrador uses to describe the reform he's backing during his administration. One of the aims of the 4T is to dismantle the reforms of the previous presidential administration that is often described as neoliberal or corrupt. Today, we are discussing one of the many reforms put forward by the current administration, which started in December 2018. We are focusing today on the president's effort to destroy the fideicomisos, or trusts, that support many types of organizations in Mexico. Specifically, we're looking at the trusts that have supported ongoing research in higher education institutions. Public trusts provide funding for research in institutions such as Cinvestav and el Colegio de la Frontera Norte, the two institutions we're going to be discussing today. To discuss the consequences of canceling the fideicomisos, we've invited two academics from the advanced graduate centers and research institutions in Mexico. First, Sárah Martínez Pellégrini. Sárah is the academic director of el Colegio de la Frontera Norte. This is an institution dedicated to research on higher education. Its vision is to generate a scientific knowledge about the Mexico-US border, and also to train highly qualified professionals. Sárah is an economist with a doctoral degree from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. Her research focuses on development and economic integration, and she's a professor of public administration and has many publications on economic development in the border region. Second, Karla Sandoval Mendoza will provide another perspective, that of a scientist. She's a professor at Cinvestav, the Center for Research and Advanced Studies of the National Polytechnic Institute. Her research examines cultural diversity of native or indigenous populations. Karla has a doctoral degree in genetics from the Universidad Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, Spain. This same university published her recent book, Ethnicity, Linguistics, and Genetic Diversity in Native Mexicans, Reconstructing the Population of History of Mesoamerica. She has a long list of published articles and scientific journals, and she has participated in many public forums discussing the issues we are considering today. Each panelist will have around 20 minutes to present their thoughts, and then I will moderate the question and answer session for the remaining of the time. Please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A section that you see in the bottom of the screen in Zoom. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the support of the Instituto for Latin American Studies at Columbia University, which is hosting this roundtable today. So we're going to start with Karla and her presentation. Thank you, Karla and Sárah, for joining us today. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Regina, very much for the presentation. I'm so glad to be here just to participate in this conversation and, of course, sharing the participation with Sárah. Regina, no, Amanda, you can help me just to project my presentation, please.
Yes. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I can see. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So I just try to organize my presentation just to give you a general overview about what is happening with this Cuarta Transformacion or 4T that we name it in Mexico. And of course, it's not my area, but I promise that I try to do my best for just to summarize the things that I also live in for a part of this scientific Mexican community. Next, please. Okay, like a general background, I just try to recapitulate the political history of Mexico since 3 years ago, on November 13 of 2020, the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, leaves the presidency of Mexico with Enrique Peña Nieto, the former president. And on December the 1st of the same year, Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, our president, that is frequently named like AMLO, that are the initials, from Morena, that is the National Regeneration Movement, arrives to the presidency. Of course, with a new vision and with a new perspective that is called the Cuarta Transformacion, the fourth transformation, with a kind of a very radical change with a very different visions of economy and also about the national politics. The central objectives of the government are to put on the top the poor people and also to fight the corruption in Mexico. With this new vision, he seeks to transform Mexico in a very peaceful way, and that his presidential mandate is. He pretends that his presidential mandate is located at the level of the three historical moments of Mexico: the independence, the reform, the revolution, and of course, the Cuarta Transformacion. Sorry, you are projecting. I forgot. Okay, next one, please. In this context, in a context of scarce resources, it is very serious just to have a little bit of money, and this little bit of money has to be assigned to the main national projects of AMLO, that he considered the central main national projects, like the construction of the Mayan train, the new airport, the refinery, and also to fight and combat the poverty. The creation of the Ministry of the Welfare was created just to give direct money or transfer direct money, a kind of pensions to elder people, disabled people, and sustainable communities, and of course, children of working mothers. Next one, please. The former presidents Enrique Peña Nieto and Calderón were a little bit more supportive with innovation, and also to link it more, to be more related with private companies, and also to give more money just to have a good economic growth. But as you can see in the graphic, when you compare the years between the 2012 and 2020, of course, this support for the innovation projects has been dramatically decreased. In 2020, we don't have any kind of support in this area, for example. And the Cuarta Transformacion process, there is a kind of radical change in science, technology, and innovation policy. Science don't occupy an important place anymore in this new politics. And of course, we can see, well, I can see a kind of top-down scheme that is adopted. The decisions now are from the top, from the top to the bottom, and also the participation of the entire community, scientific, is set a little bit aside, and the government is acting in a very centralist way. So some reactions were generated from the scientific community, and also another important thing is that now all the resources, everything is focused on the solution of the national problems, which these problems are very local, and of course a minimum percentage of this money is focused on investment of basic science. So basic science now occupies another place in the Mexican science. Next one, please. CONACYT is the agency that regulates the science in Mexico, the National Councils of Science and Technology, and is our Mexican agency in charge of promoting science, and of course to promote technological activities, establishing and renew all the governmental policies on these issues, and of course giving some scholarships in national and international scholarships. Its equivalent in the USA it could be the National Science Foundation. And another important thing is that in June 2018, a new director was announced, Dr. Maria Elena Alvarez Bulla, and it was a little bit complicated, and also it was some kind of reactions from the science community in Mexico, especially because she was new in this kind of directions. Apparently, she had never directed any institution in Mexico or in the UNAM, that is a very important university in Mexico. And it was a little bit problematic at the beginning. But at the end, she introduced a new vision, a new vision of the CONACYT. The system of the science, technology, and innovation must be include. She introduced a new vision of this CONACYT. The first one, she wants the CONACYT must to include the humanities and new concepts that were adopted for the social science. And as you can see, I am from basic science, so it's a little bit complicated for us to understand all these new concepts that were exported from the social science. For example, to understand what is the humanistic epistemology, just to introduce other knowledge or traditional knowledge in the new science, and also how to approach to native communities in Mexico, and also the new science has to be ecology commitment. These all concepts came from the science concepts, and I'm pretty sure that Sárah understands very well all these concepts. And it was another very important introduction. The new CONACYT will be the Council of Humanities, Science, and Technologies, promoting the competition of all these areas of knowledge, including the social science and humanities, in favor of scientific and technological development with ethical and social and environmental responsibility. So, and also it was a severe criticism of the role of private companies, but at the same time, it was asked to this company just to invest, to have more inversion in research. And also it was necessary just to develop new instruments, and also at the same time were eliminated some programs, especially the programs that were related with innovation. And also was established that the CONACYT will be the CONACYT will be only the agency that will attend and solve our national problems. The creation of the PRONACES was a completely new program for us. And in the following slide, I try to explain the PRONACES. And no, sorry, isn't okay. No, it's okay. The following slide. In September 2020, the president received a proposal that was elaborated with the UNAM, and also in these proposals, we received a collaboration from around 30 different institutions, and more than 300 people contribute with ideas, with different proposals, just to have a roof for a science in Mexico. But unfortunately, it was a very big mistake from my point of view, that at the moment that the science, that the Mexican science community just gave this proposal to the president, they forgot to invite the director of CONACYT. So it was a big mistake that unfortunately caused more problems in the future with CONACYT and the rest of the community, and the rest of the community. And also at the same in the following year, a modification of our educational reform was done. They pretend just to eliminate several things, so autonomy for some higher education institutions, including UNAM, including Cinvestav and other institutions. But this proposal did not proceed. And on the other hand, we received an enormous advantage of this modification, because one of the paragraphs of this constitution was modified, and they introduced a new right for all the Mexicans, that everyone has the right to enjoy the benefits of science progress and its applications. That this was very important, and it was the first time that we have this kind of the modification in our constitutions, And also another important date was the appearance of a new initiative by a senator from the state of Tlaxcala, Ana Lilia Rivera, and she her initiative was stopped thanks to the action of many organizations from the Mexican science. But we have the first draft just to see these new concepts for the Mexican science, the epistemic equality, introduce all different kind of knowledge, and also the importance of the ecological care in the science. And also in the mid of 2019, with this framework, and due to the need of give a voice to various community actors, Procencia was born, and was born this Mexican association is a kind of ONG from science. Was born due to the fact that there is no call for participation, and there is no dialogue, and there is a kind of centralism vertical approach to science, technology, and innovations sector. And another important fact was that the director of CONACYT, she was totally agreed to disappear all the trust funds, with the exception of the CONACYT and other funds. But in April 2020, the president didn't accept just to exclude some of them. And he was very emphatic to mention that some shouldn't disappear and others shouldn't not. So that means that all the trust will be disappeared. So at the end, that happens. So the trust for science disappeared at the beginning of this year, and CONACYT accept the resolutions. With the disappearance of these trust funds, the support was also lost for a lot of science academies in Mexico, like the Colmex, and also from the Mexican Academy of Mexico. And there was a lot of resource costs. And now these kind of academies are having hard times, and also sometimes it's very difficult to maintain these kind of academies. Next one, please. The budget for science in Mexico, the only budget that we have in science goes to the branch 38, that is a fiscal budget that we have it. And this budget is distributed among the 15 ministries that we have. And we used to articulate this money with different funds and with different sectors, like the army or like the educational ministry. But now with this, with the introduction of the new law, this pretend that all the budget will be exclusively concentrated in this branch, and only CONACYT will have the control of all this budget. As you can see in the graphics, by December the 1st on 2018, the budget for science, technology, and innovation was lower than the previous year. And of course, in 2020, we have a severe decrease in this budget, and also in the budget for the CONACYT. Here in the graphic where I comparing the CONACYT budget with the fiscal budget, you can see a decrease when we start the presidency of this Cuarta Transformacion. Next one, please. And also, as we know, the pandemics arrives, the pandemics came, and the resources were more reduced. And another problem that we saw is that the CONACYT did not rely on scientific community to deal with the fight against the pandemic, and inclusive just to support projects that included the development of some vaccines or to develop some ventilators. Some of them were financed by different kind of budget of sometimes an international budget, but not Mexican budget. The vaccine projects and the ventilator projects in Mexico emerged from below. Some research groups looked for other resources because of the absence of support, and they emerged from bottom up. And some specialists that we have a lot in Mexico, they offer a lot of solutions against the pandemic. And also at the beginning of this year, on December 14 and 2020, the director of CONACYT presents a preliminary draft of the Law of Humanities, Science, Technology, and Innovation, in which many of the previous calls, grant calls, were eliminated, and all the new grants or all the new budget for science in Mexico were assigned just to PRONACES and PRONAE, the new programs, and both were created just to have a kind of invitations to develop projects with a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary view, and also a kind of develop just with the object to develop a multidimensional projects that resolve the 10 strategies national programs that are, the next one, please. That are 10 that are the most important that we have in Mexico. That is health, water, education, human security, food sovereignty, toxic agents and polluting process, energy and climate change, socio-ecological system, housing, and culture. They are agree with these sustainable development goals from the United Nations. Although there are no 17, there are 10, and only a little part were modified. The proposal has been established with the absence of open communication and open dialogue. And as we experimented, a lot of colleagues experimented in Mexico, we perceive that there is no intention to listen different actors of the science communication. And the new scheme is top-down schemes. The decisions go from the top to the bottom, and also the current proposal, the current law. The current law that we have until now is based on participation as a form of participation with different funds, with the trust, and also all this with transparency and also with the freedom to do any kind of science, including the basic science. And all this scheme is completely eliminated in these new proposals. Like a final conclusions, I can tell you the next one, please, and the last one, Amanda. Well, is that I can see that there is a kind of erosion of most of the organs of the science, technology, and innovation in Mexico. The Mexican scientific community has sacrificed the dialogue with CONACYT and with other different institutions, and is very difficult just to perceive that this kind of concentration of power in one hand, especially in the director of the CONACYT, and the financing is only, the financing resources that we have is focused only in annual plans. All these transactional, or I don't know how to translate, well, the period of 6 years that we have in any, for each president. So we cannot go more than that period. So that is a little bit complicated, especially when we develop projects in basic science. And also we see a reduction of scholarships, national and abroad scholarships. Here in these two last graphics, you can see that the budget for CONACYT from the 2020 versus, from the 2019 versus 2020, you can see a decrease in fellowships, and also for the budget for some institutions, and also for the national system of researchers that we have, that is a economical compensation that we have and we receive, that is based in our academic productivity. And also there is not intentions to give more money for innovations project that is very complicated for basic science. Well, thank you so much. Now it's turn for Amanda.
Thank you very much, Karla. So now we're going to have the presentation by Sárah Martínez Pellégrini.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. So there we go. And I think my presentation is going to be like a specific case of what Karla's been saying. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here. I think it's very important for us to be able to discuss what's happening, because as Karla was putting it, I think it's a major change in how science is seen within society, and whether it's considered something important and it's seen with a long-term view, or just seen as something that's there but whose implications and benefits are not so clear. So I'm gonna focus on the research trust, because it's, for us it was a very important tool in terms of institutional development. And I think that's basic for all the institutions that make research in Mexico, for the following reasons. Most of the research in Mexico is funded by the government, because there's not a very big tradition in terms of investments from firms or other organizations. So that leads us to be very dependent on that budget from the government. Another important thing here is that it's been a system that's been working for years. When I came to Mexico, I'm Spanish, so I was very surprised, because I think you can hardly find such a big system from the organization point of view. We are talking about 27 research centers all along the country. And those research centers are lucky, so to speak, because you have that budget and you can really focus on higher education or research. So it's not like universities where you have much more stress with classes and undergrads and all that. And one of the things we're seeing is that it was a big bet for Mexico in terms of developing certain areas of knowledge. And it seems all that's getting dismantled pretty quickly now. And one of the main questions is whether dismantling all that infrastructure would be something that's gonna have a big effect on education and other aspects projects in the long run, because it's true, it's research centers, but many of them are very, very much linked to regenerating information for decision makers, to having those specialized programs for postgraduate students, basically. So I guess what's not been taken into account is how this area, CONACYT, which was considered as, some funny researchers locked up in their own world and without any relationship with the rest of the country in some of the president's interventions with media, how they were really linked with many other activities, and that can really be a big problem for those activities to go on afterwards. So what are those research trusts that we had? Well, basically they were a way to have the budget Karla was talking about focused on research. And we were very, very controlled. That's very important, because we had a whole set of inspectors and rules and many things to do to have that money in those trusts. And they were originated because as a budget public, we were just treated as any kind of ministry. So many of the things that you have to do when you do research, like buying books or other weird things that, as they say, for a ministry, weren't really allowed if we just managed our budget as a ministry or another public area. So the idea to start working with those trust funds was basically to make more flexible the use of resources so they could match the needs of research, basically. Why is this important? Because as public institutions, we need to manage all of our resources, with certain rules that are very, very strict and that are controlled by many different other areas of the government. So that was a real challenge for the projects. And basically because our budget runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So as Karla was saying, if you had a project running over 2 or 3 years, well, that you had to give the money back to the IRS, basically, so you couldn't finish the project. The second thing is that many times the money for those projects comes from other organizations or firms or other people, but as soon as they come into our budget, they become public money. So we need to have a way to put that money in another area, let's say, from our way to work with it, so it won't go back to the IRS at the end of each year. That's very important, because one of the basic questions we were trying to work on with these trust funds were really to have a very clear way to explain what we were doing with that money. And another important thing to say is that they were really tied to agreements signed with other institutions. So the budget was really very clear and specifically tied to those activities and couldn't be used for other things. I guess one of the problems the academic community is feeling, as Karla was saying, is that there is a distrust situation, which is kind of hard to bear in many cases, because we feel as one of the areas that were really very, very controlled to do it under very strict legal. So being treated as other areas that weren't as controlled has been, I think, a very, very bad sign for us, because as public centers, we have, I would say, sometimes it's really hard to keep up with all the regulations and paperwork and all the things you have to do. And then when that happened, even when those trust funds, in our case, for instance, it was audited every year, and we never had a single problem, nothing was it was working. So I think there is that feeling that you were following the rules for years, so you could have that complexity, and goes disappears without any real reasons. So I guess that's creating a very big frustration feeling among the community. And the other thing that's happening, I think, is that, as Karla was saying, we are having changes that are very quick. And well, I would say in some ways it's hard to understand how they are connected to each other. So that creates a climate of uncertainty too, which is not very good for long-term research or big projects, or when you have a network where you have many researchers and rules become unclear, things work well in a weird way, because everyone started to protect their processes or their projects, and so it's becoming very, very hard to work among institutions with a certain stability. What was the operational structure? I just wanted you to see that, because really it was a structure which was designed to ensure or to guarantee that decisions were clear and were very much close to projects and to the institutional objectives and the agreements. So it was a commercial trust, but with a bank, but we had to guarantee that the funds were in the stable investment part. So it would be it won't be lost if there were any problems in the market. And besides that, we had a trust committee, and all the trusts that were in the institutions worked like that. So it wasn't only Colegio. What I mean is that one of the problems, as I was saying at the beginning, was that different trusts were treated exactly the same way, as if they hadn't any control at all. And that's I'd rather like to insist on that. That was very frustrating for the ones that were really working as it should be done, following the law. Mm-hmm. So our trust committee was having meetings every month or 3 months, depending on how things were working. But it was, you could see, well, the president of the institution was there, the provost, the dean for academic affairs, 2 researchers from Colegio that were elected from the community, 2 researchers from other academic institutions. In that case, it was Colmex and University of Baja California. And we have the internal auditor that's part of the committee too. And well, that person comes from the Secretaría de la Función Pública, which is kind of the Office of Audit and Control in Mexico. So as you can imagine, we weren't really keen on doing weird things or anything that wasn't really clear in terms of our objectives and activities and all that. What was the resource structure? That's very important because it's got a lot to do with what Karla was doing. We just were working on 3 big parts of those resources. First, we had the projects, because all the projects went into the trust, so we could work over several years instead of just 1 year. And they had we had the control over the amount they were taking to the trust and how it was being spent. So there weren't any problems about exchanging resources from one project to another. And this follow-up was done monthly by all the administrative structure of the institutions. So we've never had a problem with money disappearing or going from one project to another, so projects couldn't be finished in time. Then we had an overhead, which was 15% of the projects. And that's very important because that was a fund or an amount that enabled the institution to have or build up a small equity. So we had interests on it, basically to buy things that weren't allowed be allowed through our fiscal budget, because as I was telling you, we are just like a ministry. So for instance, we have certain problems to buy software because it's too specialized. So we have to explain why we need that software. We have to explain why we buy books. So that was much easier doing it through the trust funds instead of through the fiscal budget, because many times it's even forbidden to buy it with fiscal money. And as you can imagine, it's not very easy to make research if you don't have the software you need, or you can't buy books, for instance. So that was very important for us. And then we had that part that was called patrimonio, which was the accumulation of all the interests we had before. So that was growing, and those interests growing, and sometimes we had some remains, very small remains from projects, and that patrimonio was the part that explaining all the interests we had. Why? Because the 15% basically, and because the money for the projects of course goes to the projects, so it's money that's spent within 1 to 3 years usually. So it wasn't really based to have those interests to do all the other things we couldn't do with the fiscal budget. Here I'm showing you how our trust fund grew from 2002 until 2019. So as you can see, that was very important for us because, well, it's not, it might sound as a small fund for some institutions, but for us it was kind of important because, as I'm telling you, it was a warranty that we could publish the books for the Colegio, for example, because the last 2 years, for instance, we don't have any budget for books to be published by Colegio. So it came from this trust fund. We had sometimes problems with, I don't know, any kind of equipment like electrical equipment or computers or whatever. All that was bought with the resources we had from the interests from the trust fund. So as Karla was saying, last year we had that order to extinguish our trust fund. Okay, so, well, that's one of the ways we were just following up every month how the trust fund was working. So as we see, we had basically the movements or the money coming in and out for the projects. And what were the benefits for the institution? And I'm almost finishing now. Basically, we had that financial flexibility for projects because otherwise we are really tied up. The budget we have from the public sectors basically tied to operation areas like salaries or electricity or water. Or so the other thing is with the 40% cutback we had last year, we were lucky. We didn't have to go to Colegio this year because otherwise we won't have been able to pay electricity, for instance. So this is getting, it's being a very big concern because if we don't have the trust fund anymore, we won't have resources from anywhere else either to try to overcome those cutbacks in budget, which are being really, really important. Last year, as I'm telling you, it was 30%. And it's really going to areas as electricity, not salaries, but all the rest, all the other operational expenses we have. So it might be a problem for the institution. The other benefit were those interests, because as I was telling you, that was basically the resources we had to do those other things. And well, I think the examples that can back the need to have those kind of tools in the institutions are that we won't be able to publish if we don't have that money. And we won't be able to maintain part of the infrastructure either because we didn't have money assigned for that. And we won't be able to change computers or equipment in general either. What's the new framework? As Karla was saying, I was going to talk much more about this, but I'll do it shorter. I think the first problem is that the complex administration we are getting into. Why? Because now we're going to have to work with individual accounts for every project, and we'll have to be auditing every account as an independent account, for instance. We'll have to have those IRS permits to open each account for a project. That's another big deal, because as you can imagine, that's gonna be much paperwork. And then the third point is that it's gonna delay the funds we have in how we can manage them for projects, because we are going to be obliged to ask for permission for almost everything we do with that money, even if we have an agreement, a contract, or anything like that's already establishing clearly how the resources or the activities are going to be done. And I think that's the big concern about that, is that, as Karla was saying, we are going back to a very centralized system. And well, there is a new law which is talking about having state science in Mexico. So as you can imagine, that's really frightening for all of us, because, well, state science could be read in many different ways, but some of them are not very, very appealing, so to speak. And this has a lot to do with those 10 programs Karla was talking about. For us, COLEF is a research center and basically in social sciences. So it's kind of easier for us to make that match with what's social impact of different things. We have areas in working on climate change and on innovation, a bit more technical innovation too, but basically it's kind of easier for us to do that match with social objectives, so to call them. But even though what we've seen is that there are keywords that should be in every proposal and every research, and if you don't use those keywords, probably your research won't be really valued, or even your results won't be listened to. And those keywords in many ways have much more to do with ideological perspectives or ways to put things than really with technical words. So we are getting into a problem now, because, for instance, you have to put sustainable everywhere. That's one of the big issues. You have to talk about social inequality all the time. And it's a problem because it's beginning to empty those concepts of their real meaning, because they are kind of becoming, big umbrella. So everything is social, everything is sustainable, and that's becoming a big problem in terms of, well, I guess real work with science and concepts in many ways. And I think the other big issue here is that different areas are treated very much alike. And it makes no difference whether you are making basic science, humanities, or you are kind of obliged to have the same objectives and the same ways to measure your impacts. And that's kind of a nonsense too, because, well, in the end, we'll all be doing the same thing, or we'll all be simulating we are doing the same thing, which is kind of a big problem. Probably, I think we'll find ways to overcome that, because, institutions are resilient in many ways. So I don't want to be, let's say, to leave on the table a message kind of inducing people to think we won't go on with the work we do. But I think it's going to be a very big challenge, because on the one hand, there are, I think, positive things about what's been put on the table. And for me, it's, well, as an economist, I think trying to make science more applied is very, very important, because otherwise we get into other problems where sometimes academics can become a bureaucracy centered on our own objectives, our own interests, and lose a sense of the context. But it has to be, I think, done in a more progressive way, and probably taking into account the different profiles of the different institutions. And I think what's been happening now, and not only with the policies in research and science, but even with other policies, is that different problems are treated very, very much the same way. And with two big leading ideas, as Karla was saying, which are everybody's corrupt. That's the first point. And the second thing is everybody's equal or the same. And Mexico is a very, very diverse country. So I think that can create in the long term big problems about the efficiency of the measures that are being taken. That would be all. Thank you very much for listening, and be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sárah, for that very interesting presentation. I would like to remind the people that are participating in this roundtable to please use the question and answer. It says Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom, so we can read your questions, because I don't think you're able to use the chat. So please write your questions there for our two presenters. So I would like first to ask Karla and Sárah if they have any questions for each other, before, so we can give people to write questions and answers.
I have a question for Sárah. Sárah, thank you very much for your beautiful explanation. And now, well, for me, it's just a relief just to see that it's not only the feeling of all the people that we are doing a kind of basic science, of genomic science, or this hard science. So I, at the beginning, I thought that it was a kind of my misunderstanding of social science, but after listening to your talk, I think that we are in the same situation. So what do you think that is the prognostic for this year and for the following years for the science in Mexico? Do you think that we have a chance or not? And my other question, just the last one, is that do you think that in the future all the science community in Mexico will be together and just to have a common front and just to, I don't know, just to have a general consensus and just to have a general organization of how to be more resilient and just to how to fight with all this disaster.
Sárah, do you want to respond?
Let's say I hope we'll be able to do it. Thank you for the questions, Karla, but I guess I'm very much like you. The thing is that I know these things because I've been at the working as a dean at Colegio, so I guess you get both sides, the administrative side and the research side. But I think that's one of the things we probably will learn, is how to work together much better, which I think is good for us, because sometimes we tend to be very, very close to the other aspects of research. But I think the same thing is happening to the different areas in research, because, well, I guess humanities are very much in the same situation we are as social and basic sciences. So I guess one of the things that can explain this too is being critical as academics, sometimes we're not very good at sharing the knowledge we have too. And I think that's been happening in some areas too. So, maybe I think one of the, well, you know, I'm an optimist by nature. So I tend to think we'll be able to react in more creative ways, because I think we were kind of tied to the same answers to problems we are facing towards this new administration. And make start, I don't know, having new answers that could kind of make this new administration see that scientists are not out of society in many ways. You know, it's kind of weird to me when I hear those expressions. Institutions are corrupt. Well, institutions are people. Mm-hmm. So they are not coming from Mars or, I don't know, Venus or something. So when we're saying that, we are saying that almost all of us are kind of contributing to that. And I guess that's part of what we should be changing, because I think we are kind of all part of what's happening, and we are all responsible for giving some other answers. And maybe one of the possibilities will be to work with other people than only among academics.
And who are the other people you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of social organizations. I'm thinking of, I don't know, for instance, firms, but small firms, because that's the other thing. Cuarta is very much focused on small firms, for instance. So if you go and work with the big firms, you are kind of the elite, you know, so it's not a problem. But I guess we can start working with other actors which are many times aware of the problems we are solving, even when it's basic science, for instance. I think if we get that possibility to explain to people how we are useful to them, maybe not right now, but in 10 years' time, you'll have a better, I don't know, a better vaccine, or maybe we'll start having the backup from those committees. Because, for instance, I can talk about one or two projects here. We were working with some people, immigrant people from Oaxaca, who are indigenous people. And, you know, it's funny because many times they understand what we do much better than, I don't know, the government, for instance. So we started working with projects with them, and they became the real sponsors for the projects. So maybe that's something we should start doing in this 4D context. I don't know.
But thank you so much. So there is a question in the question and answer.
Yes, so thank you very much, Sárah and Karla. I'm going to read the question. The question is there communication between the different CONACYT centers to discuss these issues? I believe both of you talked a little bit about CONACYT, so whoever wants to take the floor.
Sárah, you are the director of one of these centers. You must know.
I'm the dean. I'm not the director, not as high. But I think there is conversations, but it's among the directors, as Karla was saying. So probably in our case, we are kind of lucky because we work a lot with CICESE, which is a basic research center too. So we, in the region, we kind of have this communication, and we try to have a kind of common position with things, but I think it's not very organized yet. Actually, one of the critiques, and Karla can talk more about this, she talked about a few organizations that were dismantled, and those were associations where researchers could discuss these things in other than within their own community as research centers. So that's been one of the critiques to that new system, because that El Consejo Consultivo, which was an intermediate organization that tended to consult all the researchers in Mexico for certain subjects, has disappeared. So I guess the effort will be to build this on our own as centers. I don't know, Karla.
So Sárah, I would like to ask you a question. So what happened when the fideicomisos that you explained to us have to be moved to other accounts and put it in a yearly budget, or some project that had long-term expenses were able to keep their fideicomisos, or everything was completely transformed?
What we had is that those fideicomisos were like account. Okay, so all the money for the projects that were running over several years went into that fideicomiso. The one I gave you data for was more one because it was the Colegio fideicomiso, our own fideicomiso, which was with the money of the projects the institution had. Okay, so it's a bit different with CONACYT fideicomisos, because what they had is the amount of money that was given to them years ago, and they were running so to be able to open concursos. Can't find my word now. Well, so they kind of launched. They asked for proposals. Those proposals were kind of revised by peers, and then they were given the money or not. And they were very, very much bigger than the institutional fideicomisos. So I guess for CONACYT, one of the things is that they thought those fideicomisos were kind of not very clear in the way they were worked with. And actually, there was a questioning about what they were doing with the interests, and the projects that were selected were really I think that the problem were for the resources, but probably it was harder to work on new ways, administrations that were more suitable for their means than just taking fideicomisos out. The other thing that's happening is that the government is getting into problems because, as you know, with the pandemic and all that, well, the resources are going down. So there is a fear that it was just a way to get that money for other purposes, basically. So I think we have to make a difference between the governmental trust funds, which are much bigger and much more linked to the general policy, and what were the trust funds Karla was talking about the institutions had, because our trust funds were very, very controlled and were much smaller and were much more kind of operational tool for us to work with the project. So that's why CONACYT was asked to keep those trust funds working, because they were really like a way in which we could really work with projects in a much more efficient way.
Thank you, Sárah. So we have more questions. Romina, you're gonna...
Sure, yes. There is a big comment in Spanish. I am wondering, maybe I should read both. I'm going to try to translate it. So one of the attendees is saying that I believe that the perspective of diversity of the country, the aid to science and to different areas, the analysis about aid to research, they have all been different. In the Northeast, the difference between one 6-year term and the other is not observable yet. Aid to the social sciences has been very scarce and only when projects are linked to productivity issues. There is no support for research on security, human rights, and such topics. Topics on engineering and productivity were always preferred. It is not only this does not only regard research, but also scholarships. And in the previous term, because there was no interest in the social scientists, and in this one, it is because there is no funding.
Or Karla, would you like to respond?
I'm agree with Marco Navarro with all these reflections. Well, as you can see, Marco, with these 10 topics that belongs to the new strategy national programs, the fourth one is human security. And of course, in the north part of the Mexico, we have a serious problem about the human security. Well, not also in the north. I'm living in the region of Bajío, and we are in an area that is very similar to have a kind of civil war between the cartels and the other cartels that are the Huachicoleros cartel. So I hope that in the future, this kind of money, I don't know how, but the budget that we receive for science definitely will apply to solve these kind of problems. I don't have the formula. I don't know how to do it, but there is just important that we see that there is an interest of human security, especially for our country.
Well, he said he's talking about mixed funds. Can you explain us, Sárah, what mixed funds are?
I guess he's referring to one of the funds CONACYT had, which was called Fondos Mixtos. And those were, let's say, the priorities in research in those funds were set by the states, not the federal government, the states and the federal government. So they were funded half and half. And they should agree because it was aimed to solve local problems, as Karla was saying. When I say local, I mean state problems, because we, as you said, you know, Mexico is very diverse, so different states have very different problems or very different priorities. But the thing is, sometimes what we could see too is that you had those funds and they were working on the same objectives, and they weren't giving enough money to really have an advance on the problem. So I'd like to believe what the government is trying to do is making you know, like bigger areas, so they can give a bigger fund to solve the main problems, instead of funding 20 problems which can be solved because they don't have enough resources to go to the end of what they are trying to do. But those mixed funds were really important for some of the states, and I guess it's where you could see really differences between the kind of projects that were funded.
And do you think that the states felt they had more autonomy with the mixed funds, that now that the bigger funds are centrally controlled by CONACYT? So how the states now can participate?
I think this has very much to do with what Karla was saying about that centralized view, you know, and the problem is that, for instance, security is kind of a common problem in different aspects or with different depths. in different states, but that's kind of a common problem. But you have other things that are very, very different, as education, for instance. So for education, I think it's going to be a big problem to have a general fund with the same rules for everyone. Because in some ways, well, security is also different, but it's, I guess, at the level where we are, a more general policy could be applied in many places. But I think in education or health issues or other areas, it's, or even for the, as they were saying, projects on I don't know, firms development or it's gonna be much harder to have those general funds because some of the states are really almost different words in the way they work and the needs they have.
Thank you so much, Karla and Sárah. We have a few more questions. Maybe I can ask, since we're nearing 6 o'clock, I can ask one to each of you. So for Karla, one of them is, what effects might some of the reforms that you discussed have on students or researchers themselves, particularly graduate students? Maybe you can speak to that. And then Sárah, there's another question that says, regarding the use of key terminology in new research, is the goal of the current administration to produce research that serves only the SDGs or international goals? And how does that affect research funding for local realities?
Yeah, well, I can share with you the, for example, from Cinvestav, with the elimination of the science, of the trust for science in Cinvestav, we have a serious problem because some of the scholarships that we used to give to the students just to finish their PhD of the master degree, they were interrupted. So there is no other way just to receive an extra scholarship. And even when the period of the scholarship from CONACYT was done, we used to have that option just to continue giving more scholarships or just a couple of months just to solve these particular situations. And also, as Sárah mentioned before, just to give general maintenance for the equipment that is very important for the labs, just to keep everything running. So now it's a little bit complicated. And also, well, I forgot also to mention, well, no, I don't want to mention that. But we have all these situations, and also just to pay the access for the open access for some international international magazines is a little bit complicated, and a lot of scientific service. We have to put a lot of scientific service inside of our institution.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the international goals and the local community, there is something interesting about this policy in Mexico now, and I think that's part of what makes us feel that uncertainty I was talking about. It's true we are aligned to the international goals, but as Karla was saying too, there is very much emphasis on what's local and the people of Mexico. So we are kind of working on the two levels, and I guess part of the things you have to do is to match both ideas. So to try to apply international goals to the reality of people in Mexico. So I don't think that is necessarily a problem, but what I think is a problem is if we don't have a bit more clarity about what's the real aim in a medium or long-term scenario, basically.
Thank you.
You have another question, Amanda?
Romina, I think there are a few others if you want to read. We have time for one or two more, I think.
Okay, great. The following question is to Karla, and it says, is there any alternative given by the current administration to make up for the budget cuts in the sciences?
Romina, can you repeat it again? It's because my internet is
Sure.
Yeah, I couldn't
Sure.
hear you very well, sorry.
No, that's okay. Is there any alternative given by the current administration to make up for the budget cuts in the sciences? So they're basically asking if the current presidency or the 6-year term is saying, okay, we're not using these trust funds anymore, but instead we are allocating some other funds for that.
So when the present administration decided just to cut all the trust, I remember that we receive a proposal, or that we hear a proposal that probably they will find a different way just to give money, or just to give an extra money for science. As I can tell you that we're still waiting just to see what will be the different ways to receive that funds. And also it's a little bit complicated just to see how everything is evaluated with the same eye, with the same rule, and there is not, it's very frustrating just to see that they cannot apply the scientific method, you know, just to observe, just to study it, just to decide, and just to modify the things that are wrong. So everything is corrupted, everything is bad, and is a kind of desperation, because we cannot see what will be the way to follow, what will be the way to have more money for science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karla. If we still have time for another question, this one does not say to whom. So it goes, how helpful is it to receive bottom-up funding for the sciences? Oh, well, for the sciences to the country's scientific development? Does it give a little more flexibility in decision-making in neoliberal terms? Do you understand the question? If you don't, just let me know.
Well, I guess I can try to answer it. I think it will work very well if the bottom-up funding doesn't mean you are looking for something that has a very small impact. That would be one of the problems. For instance, if a firm is funding as research centers, as we are designed for more general knowledge, we can do specific things, but we have to look for a more general impact too. So I don't think there is any problem as far as the local funder understands we need to take our project a bit further and share it with other actors, or have a scope that's a bit broader than just one person or one firm. Or I don't think that's a big problem, and we are having cases already of projects being funded from let's say bottom up instead of top down.
Can you give us a concrete example of a project?
Yeah, sure. We started with some wineries, for instance. So we were working on different ways to have sustainable ways to work with water because the communities around didn't have enough water. So it started with the wineries, and then the systems for water use and water collection were used for the rest of the community too. So it became kind of a pilot study, and then it could be used for broader communities and with a broader impact.
So you're talking about the wineries in the Valle de Guadalupe, close to Ensenada, and they consume a lot of water, and they have to bring it out from the subsuelo, no? Because there is not a lot of rain there, but that is affecting the communities around.
The thing is that it's not that they consume too much water, because grapes are kind of efficient in that way, but there is not too much water, and they had many of the permits. So the thing was, if they improved their own technology with the water use, they were kind of using less of the common pool of water they had. So, and they also could show the other people living there how to make a better use of their own resource. So it's kind of a common knowledge that's shared by the different people living in the area.
That's interesting. So is there another question?
There is another question, yes. So there's one from Alfonso. He said, I'm no Mexican. Call me a súbdito, so a servant of Mexican cultural imperialism. Fondo de Cultura Económica and all that. Fondo de Cultura Económica is a publishing house. So ever since studying economics in my home country, I have been following what is going on in, quote, our real big hermano, quote, so our real big brother, on and off. Mm-hmm. The other one up north is a stepbrother at best, capataz worst. Mm-hmm. So capataz is the foreman or the taskmaster, which leads to my question to Sárah. Was the new policy designed in any way to accommodate Mexico's role in a UMSCA world? That means, does it deliberately tie the luck of the weakest link to the US? Okay. Do you want me to repeat the question? Oh, I think you can see it.
You can see it.
I'm just thinking. I think it's kind of a complicated question because I think in some ways it looks like that, but I'm not sure it's intentional. No, so I guess some of the policies could seem to be going that way. But on the other hand, as I was saying before, there is that big issue with certain Mexican nationalism, which is very much rooted in how to make things level, the field in Mexico, because it's true in Mexico we have very, very big differences in how people live and the resources they have and all that. So I guess many times here, at least, we have the impression it's not something that's intended to be so, but sometimes, it could be read in that way.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting answer. So do we have one last question?
There is a comment. So it says, to me, AMLO has been a conny politician who has been capable to put on the knees everyone who is against his own someone who is against his own mañanera. Mañanera is, I think, his mission, right? His program in the mornings, and it is real sad to listen nothing from the research community because federal funds are the salary of many of them. So, is it possible to do something as an international community of researchers, a kind of public statement?
Alejandro, that will be very useful for all the Mexican scientific community. And one of the proposals of Presencia, when we start to organize different colleagues from different institutions, I remember that we have that kind of proposal, just to have a kind of international manifesto about what is happening in Mexico. And of course, this kind of forums that we can discuss what is the situation of the science in Mexico will be very useful. And probably in the future, I don't know, probably to continue supporting Mexican science through the international collaborations, for example, and also that's very important. And now, in particular, that we don't have too much money to do science, probably we need more support from the international colleagues.
Well, thank you, Karla, and thank you, Sárah, for sharing all this information with us. It's really interesting to learn how political changes at the federal level have changed the funding and the livelihood of the institutions you work on, and also the training of the doctoral students, because this has a lot of ramifications. Because I think, as Sárah very well explained, the fideicomisos have a lot of flexibility for the institutions, and they were also very well managed in terms of the institutions. And so we'll see what is going to happen in the future. But thank you so much. It has been a very interesting forum for learning about how federal policy is impacting at the level of the local universities. And thank you so much for your time and sharing all this information with us. And I think we can give a little applause to everybody that has participated here. And we'll be in communication. This is going to be in YouTube, so if people can see it again. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Gracias, Sárah.
Thank you. Gracias, Regina. Gracias, Amanda.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias, Romina.
Todos por su apoyo, por este tan interesante mesa redonda.